Sam Howell's playing Monday Night Football last night. It's an opportunity for a majority of football fans to watch him on a national preseason game, and he looked good. And typically, at 98% of college football programs, you get that one dude, and you try to make the most out of it. And unfortunately for Carolina, in their most hyped season, Sam Howell's last season, it didn't play out that way. The momentum did not carry over from that Orange Bowl appearance. And then from there, you just kind of like, oh, well, maybe the next guy will come around. North Carolina has that, though. They go from Sam Howell to Drake Maye, and I feel like we're right back in that spot for the Tar Heels, where you've got the special talent QB who's going to play on NFL Sundays. Now you just got to make sure you made the right moves around him to make the most out of it. I guess we'll find out in less than 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some similarities. The thing we forget about Sam Howell's team, like, look, I mean, you could see it last night. I mean, every pass he threw that was longer than every route that was longer than about 12 yards, he threw to De'Ami Brown. Like, did he miss De'Ami Brown in the fall of 2021? Yeah, I think so a little bit.
Yeah, I think so.
Also, let's not. I mean, the two other things were the Commanders didn't run the ball particularly well, but they did protect Sam Howell, which is, he only really had the one time he had to leave the pocket. That's also something that didn't happen in the fall of 2021. I still think that team had some pretty serious chemistry issues. I thought it would come out in the draft process. It didn't. It may down the road. So I think the number one thing for Drake Maye, not that Sam Howell necessarily did a bad job of keeping everyone on the same page. I think the number one thing for Drake Maye is to be a leader who keeps everyone on the same page. And obviously they had a lot of turnover on defense. I think there's some addition by subtraction there. Mm-hmm. They obviously went out and won the offseason a couple times. That doesn't always mean you get guys who are players or who get along with everybody. I mean, we saw that during the Notre Dame game last year when they're fighting on the sideline. So I think there's a couple things that kind of play to Drake Maye's advantage that Sam Howell didn't have. And not to mention, there's some running backs there, and I don't know who's going to emerge from that room, but there's no question there's some raw talent there. They've just got to kind of, figure out who's going to be his go-to receiver this year, obviously, with the turnover there. But I think he's in a good position. I don't think the expectations are as high for this. They're as high for Drake Maye as they were for Sam Howell. I don't think they're as high for this team as they were. We're not talking about this is the year that Mac puts it all together and they play for a national title. This is the year, I think last year they had a good season. They win the division. There's a lot going on there. I feel like the level of expectation is not quite. I mean,
okay. Well, here's where I'll push back.
How high those expectations were.
Here's where I'll push back on that. Drake Maye's not coming back next year, right? Last time I checked, he's not coming back.
Rhetorical question, yes.
Well, okay, it's a rhetorical question. So, if not now, when? Because you only get so many cracks at this. And Giglio, you make this point all the time, especially for programs in this area. You look back on stuff and you said, man, that was it if you didn't do it now. And I'm not saying that Mac Brown's recruiting's falling off. I'm simply pointing out that Mac Brown's not going to be coaching forever. You don't have another kind of like QB of this ilk coming down the line last time I checked, at least not back to back to back. That's really hard to do at places not called Alabama. Even Clemson runs into these issues. I just feel like this really is a window for them.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying that nobody is looking at this team.
And they're not preseason top 10 the same way that team was.
This is my point. We are forgetting in this moment how high before that Virginia Tech game, they're talking about is the Orange Bowl the floor for this team and CFP? Nobody's saying CFP with this team. Doesn't mean it can't do it, but the level of expectations that team faced was completely different, which means you can have a little bit of slippage and nobody's picking you apart the way they were at halftime of that Virginia Tech game. All they have to do is protect Drake Maye better than they protected Sam Howell that season, and the pieces are going to fall. There is no way in hell a Gene Chizik defense is going to be that bad 2 years in a row. It's impossible. It's just I had that conversation with Mac on your podcast in Charlotte.
Yes.
Mac,
yes.
I've never seen a Gene Chizik defense that bad. And Mac was like, well, buddy, we don't expect it to happen twice. I think there's a lot of upside here. I don't feel like there's that cliff that this team could fall off of like in 2021. And I think that puts Drake Maye in a much better position than Sam Howell ended up in, where all of a sudden he feels like he has to do everything because if they don't win every play, their season's going to be a failure. I think there's a little more wiggle room here for Drake Maye, which is fine. He's a different kid than Sam Howell. He's got a different personality. Obviously, his teammates love him. He's a gamer. I mean, we talked about his first conversation with Chip Lindsey was, hey, let's try not to get you killed this year. But he's a baller, and he wants to do that. He wants to take those hits. I think it'd be good for him if he didn't, but I just think he's in a little bit of a different situation. I will say this for Sam Howell. I thought scouts missed on him. I think they evaluated the team and not Sam Howell.
Yeah.
I think you could give him a mulligan for 2021. He was still a first-round pick, and I think he's got a really good chance. I don't know if he'll be, a great quarterback for the Commanders, but I think he'll be the kind of quarterback who can take you to the playoffs. And the other thing about it, like, I don't pretend to be like a quarterback expert, but I did think to my eye, his footwork looked dramatically improved. He looked a lot more stable, a lot more composed. That was the big negative scouts looked at with him, and I think he might have dealt with it, which, look, any good NFL offensive coach was going to fix. These guys aren't dumb, but it's good to see the progress.
With Drake Maye, Luke, at what point do we start talking about him as the number 1 overall pick? Because we are going to get there. I just right now, we're not having that conversation. It's all Caleb Williams. I'm just trying to, are we going to have to wait till draft season for that? Or is it going to be a game where he pops and it goes, oh, wait a second. Why aren't we talking about this 6'4" guy who's really athletic as the number 1 overall pick instead of the 6'1" guy?
Yeah, no, it's going to happen. And it's going to happen on the same timeline that his Heisman conversation happened last season. Like, oh, hey, this kid has a really good game. We should be talking about him. Or, oh, hey, this kid has another really good game. And look, he just helicoptered over the goal line. So it was like week 4 or 5. It was kind of after they'd recovered from the Notre Dame loss. All of a sudden, everyone's talking about, like, hey, this kid in North Carolina, this redshirt freshman, maybe a Heisman guy. And, of course, that's when their season also fell off a cliff, sort of coincidentally. But I do think that's sort of the progression that's going to happen. He's going to have a couple good games. The national people are going to start talking about him. Dan Orlovsky is going to do a breakdown. Oh, yeah. And then some NFL guy, one of your insiders, is going to tweet, talk to several scouts who think Drake Maye could be the number 1 pick in the draft. And then some Bleacher Report guy is going to aggregate that. And then someone else is going to do it. And there's going to be a podcast. And it's the same, it's the same human centipede of draft stuff. But that's the timetable on which it's going to happen. Also, one bad game from Caleb Williams is like putting the Mentos in the 2-liter bottle on this one.
Yes, absolutely. And you might as well put the salty ham on the hood of a car too. Let's do all the middle school myths from back in the day. Luke DeCock, columnist, News and Observer, joining us on the Eastern Automotive Group hotline. We'll close on this. Last week, we get the lease agreement between PNC Arena, the Centennial Authority, the Carolina Hurricanes, and how that impacts all the other things that we've been waiting on, the development of the arena and everything else, the improvements. I feel like we've been talking about this for years. And there's been all sorts of stops and starts and everything else. We've talked about it from the perspective of what it means for the city. We've talked about it from the perspective of what it means for the Carolina Hurricanes. What we haven't spent a lot of time talking about is what exactly does this mean for NC State? Clearly, NC State's got to get something out of this. And for as much as there's a vocal minority of folks who want to complain about the tailgating aspect of it, which I think that myth has finally been put to rest, what is NC State ultimately getting out of this new lease agreement and the development that's taking place in that spot?
Yeah, I mean, the number one top line here is NC State's getting $300 million in arena renovations, gets a say in them, doesn't have to put a nickel in. Like, nobody's come to NC State and say, hey, you want to chip in on any of this? Now, they get money from the naming rights that's supposed to be put back into the arena. Mm-hmm. But even on that, like the locker room renovation that's supposed to start soon, it's supposed to be going on right now, I think. Even that, the Centennial Authority is paying above that limit for them. So they continue to get an unbelievable deal in this arena. I know State fans want to move back to Reynolds or build their own arena on Centennial campus. Financially, this is a terrific deal for NC State. It gets better now because now you're going to get a much better arena. You're going to get recruiting enhancements. You're going to get all of that without putting a nickel in. And the deal you cut, you get a 5-acre tailgating zone on the south end of the arena property facing Carter Finley. And half of any property that gets moved is got to be surface parking, not deck parking. So all the people who have PTSD from trying to get out of the Reynolds deck in 1992, I hope they will finally be quiet about this and let Raleigh move into the 21st century, because this is a great deal for NC State. And the other part of it is, and this is the part I never understood, none of the lots around Carter Finley were ever going to be touched. Like people are always freaking out, like they're going to build a parking deck behind the Murphy Center. And it was like, anyone builds a parking deck behind the Murphy Center, it's going to be State. When State wanted to build an indoor practice facility, they didn't mind digging up 1,000 parking spots. So it's never really slowed State down. It just, so the whole thing was kind of like a satanic panic about parking. But it's a great deal for state. They get the tailgating preserved. They get all of these renovations and a say in them without putting a nickel in. And I had this conversation with Boo Corrigan. This is all very hazy at this point. But in the later phases of development, as it moves closer to Carter Finley, I think there's going to be an opportunity for NC State to work with Dundon or whatever developer is doing that portion of the project and build a retail store, Wolfpack Club lounge, practice facility, offices. And I've told Boo this, if you guys don't have a building with condos with balconies overlooking Carter Finley to sell to the Wolfpack Club, you are doing this wrong. This is your play. Your play is to build a basketball/football building that is fan friendly and a revenue generator. Remember, hey, we got to add Cal and Stanford to generate revenue. Oh my God, otherwise we're not going to, get to the CFP. A revenue generator, but that's down the road. I mean, I know that, the Dale Center is still a good facility and all that, but it would be really nice for NC State to have a modern new basketball facility. You can do that vertically now, like Madison Square Garden. So I think that's potentially in the cards. But the other thing NC State gets is stability. Hurricanes are going to be there through 2044. If the Hurricanes ever left, especially sort of under these previous negotiations, NC State was going to be left holding a pretty big bag.
Yeah.
Because that arena does not pay for itself without the Hurricanes. And people are going to be coming to NC State with their hand out. So there's security there for NC State as well.
Is there any movement on Giglio's idea to remove that lower bowl seating and get over our, the whole point was we have to have more seats than the Smith Center. So let's shove them all in. And I feel like, and I know people want to rip Carolina for taking seats out of Keenan to make things more comfortable, but you try sitting in the weird curvature in those aluminum bleachers with the back up on your knees. Okay. And I feel it's gotten to the point now where I actually prefer sitting in the upper section, the upper level at PNC.
Yeah, it's much
because
better.
I don't have, I'm not like confined the way even above the speakers.
Wedged between two cup holders.
Yeah, the little cup holders and everything else.
Yeah, that's absolutely. So they have this menu is the word everyone uses of renovations to choose from the architects and consultants to spend this $300 million on. Now, some of that money is going to go backstage. They got to build a bigger loading dock. They got to add more offices on the north end of the arena, blah, blah, blah. But yes, you're going to lose seats because you're going to have bars now that face the arena instead of the concourse. So you're going to be able to watch the game from a bar. You're going to have more club type stuff. You're going to have clubs under the stands potentially. I'll tell you, the Islanders arena inside the bowl in Brooklyn or in Belmont, still very, very similar to PNC, that experience sort of inside the arena bowl. You go out into those concourses, there's food courts, there's atriums. The main entrance is like an old train station with this huge roof and escalators and stuff. That's kind of what the 2023 arena experience is now. It's not just what you do in your seats, it's what you do around your seats. And then you don't have to sit in your seat. You got a club, you got a place where a lot of their concession stands are kind of like the priority lounges at PNC, except they're open to everybody. So you don't have to watch the game from your seat. You can go get something to eat, watch the game from there. And they're going to reconfigure, to your point, reconfigure that lower bowl. Code has changed on the number of aisles you need. So you can reconfigure that lower bowl. A lot of the staircases on the outer ring of the arena that connect the one level to the 2 level and the 3 level, the code has changed again. You can take those out, and now you're going to have that arena concourse open to the outside. A rooftop deck on the 300 level is like the most overdue thing ever, overlooking Carter Finley, that whole thing. And then obviously, you're going to have bars and restaurants around the arena, which you don't have now. So yes, the fan going experience, both inside and outside the arena, is going to change drastically. To me, the biggest change is going to be the opportunity to watch the game from places that aren't your seat.
Got it.
And right now you can sort of do that in the priority lounges. That's going to be all over every level. That's what people want now. They want collision spaces, and NC State talks about this. You want to get back to what's in it for NC State. That's what young alumni want. You want to get young alumni more engaged with basketball. So it's not just a bunch of guys who have been members of the Wolfpack Club for 75 years who don't show up for the BC game. You got to give them spaces that they can interact and make it a scene. It's going to be a scene. I mean, that's the whole point of all of this, the inside, the outside. it's to make this more of an event. And I think that's going to benefit everybody.
Luke, we appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you next week.
See you guys.